Welcome back to Dukascopy TV. I'm Elaine Stenson. I'm joined in the studio now by Alexandre Vautravers, who's Professor of International Relations with Webster University here in Geneva. Alexandre, you're very welcome to the studio. So what can you tell me about the 19th International Humanitarian Conference? The topic this year was conflict resolution.
Well, this is a very unique conference because it has been taking place for almost 20 years. It's a collaboration between Webster University, the International Committee of the Red Cross, and also the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, and it is supported by the government of Geneva. This is very unique because it's a conference that is organized by students, and we had 60 student organizers, we had about 40 speakers, and something like 400 visitors to this conference. We talked about conflict resolution because, of course, today there are many organizations that handle collective security, that handle mediation between conflicts. So you hear a lot about peace talks with regards to Iran, with regards to Syria. The reality, unfortunately, is that approximately 30% of all of the conflicts in the world today have been hot conflicts, have been active for at least 30 years. So it's very easy to start a conflict, to start a war. Unfortunately, it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort in order to resolve these conflicts today.
Okay, and you've held this peace conference here in Geneva, which is known worldwide as the City of Peace. But where did this idea or this image of Geneva being a representative of peace come from?
Probably, I'll say, 150 years ago, the signature of the Geneva Convention was a landmark event if we want to talk about peace and if we want to talk about international humanitarian law, the law of armed conflict, and the creation of the International Committee of the Red Cross. All of this took place 150 years ago. Of course, we could also talk about all of the international organizations that actually preceded the United Nations. I can certainly talk about the League of Nations that was established here in 1919. And lastly, the conference that we held was held in the International Conference Center. This conference center, one of the largest in Europe, was actually built in order to host in 1974 the initial conference on security and cooperation in Europe between Russia, of course many representatives of the Eastern republics at the time, a couple of Western countries. This disarmament or conventional disarmament talk took place 40 years ago in this very building, and what came out of this conference of 1974 is the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe that has its headquarters in Vienna, and Switzerland, as you may know, has the rotating presidency of OSCE this year.
Yes, and one of the main topics of conversation would have been the ongoing conflict in Syria. What are the main challenges facing Syria when it's coming to finding a resolution for peace in that area?
You see, a lot of the tools that we have for conflict resolution are intended to resolve conflicts between states. And the problem that we have with the Syrian case is that, unfortunately, it is not one government or one state versus another government, because we have several parties to the conflict fighting within Syria. Number two, we have a problem because just about every one of the neighbors of Syria is either in a situation of conflict or tension itself, or has a lot of interests within the conflict. So the exacerbated problems that we have with the conflict in Syria is that until May or June of 2012, we can certainly say that definitely the Syrians themselves were able or could have been able to resolve this conflict. Now we're in a situation where the conflict has regional extensions, if you will, and not only do the Syrian negotiators need to be around the negotiating table, but just about every country in the region also has to participate in these talks. This makes these these peace talks regarding Syria extremely challenging.
Can you see the conflict in Syria, or the regional conflicts, as you just said, being resolved in the near future?
resolved is a big word, but definitely, as you know, this very week, some progress has been made and some decisions have been made with regards to the delivery of humanitarian assistance, and also with regards to the help afforded to the refugees of the Syrian crisis. We're talking about over 2 million refugees. This is a very substantial number. It represents 1 out of 5 of all refugees in the world. It's a very substantial crisis for the moment.
Okay, and what's the overall message that you want people to take from the conference over the last 2 days?
Definitely that conflicts are increasingly complicated, extremely complex, that probably the approach in order to handle these conflicts is not a simple answer. It's not a military answer. It's not a political one. It needs really a lot of actors around the table, and it's probably resolving a conflict in Afghanistan, in Syria, or other places is something that takes a lot of commitment on the behalf of the international community. It takes some consensus, and it will take years and of course a lot of money. Okay,
Professor Vautravers from Webster University, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
And that's all we have time for now, but do check back later for further updates and interviews from the TV team. Bye for now.